needing to drive demand generation so that patients come into their doctor's office and they ask for the thing that you're selling. And we know this is how American healthcare marketing works. What are the things that they care about? For most patients, they care about feeling seen and heard. They care about how they feel about the quality of the care that they're receiving. They do care about outcomes, but they measure outcomes differently than hospitals and doctors do. And then they care about having their voice heard, and they care about ease of access. So those are all things that if you are helping hospitals achieve their goals for patient engagement and satisfaction, understanding how patients experience their healthcare experience, that's going to be important.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Marketing Blender Show. I'm Dacia Coffey.
And I'm Daisy McCarty.
Today, we are talking about how to nail your B2B healthcare marketing. Now, this is an interesting one because I feel like we need to clarify what we mean by that phrase. Because of course, we've got, doctors communicating to their patients. That's not really B2B, but sometimes there are referral instances. So that's a B2B play especially when you have a specialist on hand. And then of course, we've got selling into hospitals as a component. So it might be devices, it might be pharmaceuticals, it might be equipment. So I think we're going to go pretty heavy on the business to hospital selling today. And then there's very big system plays. So if you're the hospital or if you're the healthcare system or if you're the plan communicating mostly to the market or to other businesses, we are not going to be addressing that today.
Right.
So if you're in B2B healthcare, hopefully we just helped clarify what we're talking about today. And what I'm excited about is this is one of the most complicated selling environments. I mean, this is the epitome of sales and marketing alignment, which we love, but it's also why we took a hot minute to wait and really do some due diligence and prep this topic because there's really a lot to it.
There is. And we'll be talking about selling to private practices versus selling to hospitals. And we'll be talking about all of the different personas involved and the different things they care about. So stay tuned. This is going to be good.
Absolutely. So I think we just have to start there. Like as always, and I don't know if our audience is going to love this or they're, and get to the point where they're going to talk about personas and start predicting it. But this one is critical because this one is where we see so many problems that are rapidly addressed by clarifying what personas need to be activated. How does pain flow through organizations and relationship? How does money flow through the environment? And really mapping who the personas are that you have to focus on.
Very true. So let's start with persona of the doctor.
Yeah.
This is always the one that people think they're exclusively selling to. It's never the only person that you're selling to, but it's the first one you need to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think the challenging part about selling to a doctor is you have to remember they don't really care what is happening with your product. They're thinking, what does it do for my practice? What does it do for my patient? What does it do for my reputation? What does it do for my team? So there is a major difference between what your features and benefits or your value proposition overall might be at its core compared to what is in it for the doctor and what do they care about. So that alignment is really, really key. And these are very human, very sophisticated environments. There's a lot of emotion, no matter if you're talking at the administrative level or at the practice to patient level.
So I'd like to give you a few quick tips based on many, many years of working with doctors and helping them with their marketing. What do they care about? So the number one thing that doctors care about is patient outcomes. That's going to be the first thing that you'll want to make sure that you're addressing with whatever you're trying to market or sell to them is how does this impact patient outcomes? Number two, and they may not admit this, but it is peer recognition. They care what the rest of the medical community and especially the other professionals in their area of specialization, how are they viewed by them? So patient outcomes and peer recognition. Then they'll also, of course, care about streamlining processes. If they're in a private practice, they have a lot of money stress. There's a reason that hospital systems are gobbling up private practices right and left because it is hard, much harder to make money as a physician in private practice than you could ever imagine. So streamline processes, getting more for their time, and getting insurance companies to pay. Those are your top 5 things that every doctor that I have ever worked with cares about.
It's such a great point because if you're not talking about that, they simply won't hear you because that is their day-to-day reality. That is what you're competing against. Even if you don't have something that aligns with one of those, you have to acknowledge that that's the noise happening around them all the time. And one thing that you mentioned around patient outcomes is that, like, back from my pharmaceutical days, I can speak to this so specifically. You have to get specific. That specificity has to break through the market. So doctors have so much going on in their day-to-day that you might come in and talk to them about something, but they're not going to take action or have that scenario, whether it's time to think about it or the patient that they need to serve through what you're offering. No matter what it is, there's usually lag time between when they heard about you or when they talked to you specifically, your sales rep, and when they actually activate. So the more specific you can be about this is the exact use case, this is the exact patient, this is the exact environment, this is the exact problem, and what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like, that is the likelihood, that increases your likelihood of memory being triggered around, wow, I just heard about this the other day, and maybe I've got a solution that I want to look into in order to solve this or progress this outcome.
And I think this all comes down to what we were discussing before this show around aligning with their priorities and not my products and features. And this, of course, applies to all B2B marketing all the time. Stop trying to sell your features. In fact, stop trying to make the focus be on your benefits, but focus on what your customer cares about right in that moment.
Yeah. And, if this is a peer-to-peer situation, so for instance, if it's a specialist and they get, or an adjacent company, right? And they get all of their business because of referrals from other providers, understanding what those referrals represent is absolutely critical. So there's a couple of different ones that I think about. So one of them is there friction in that referral? So in network versus out of network. We have a client where they're actually less expensive despite being out of network. But the friction for the doctor to be able to communicate that to a patient when there's such strong association with in-network is really, really high. So we've really had to do a lot of thoughtfulness around how do we navigate it? How do we make it easy for that initiating provider to give the referral and to see it through and how to activate that patient? And so that friction component can be a real key, but also understanding why they choose you or why they'll go through the friction intentionally. And wow, the answers, you should never just assume that you know where that referral is coming from or why you're getting it. Going straight to the source so that you can hear what they value, absolutely critical, because it could be anything from relationship or recognition or, the kind of circles that they want to hang out in to outcomes, to they trust you more, we've heard so many surprising answers. And so just always go to the source if that's the scenario.
So we can talk about business to hospital next, I think, because this is where things get really, really messy. This is not an easy environment to sell into. Long sales cycles, compliance issues, politics,
contracts,
yes,
changing decision makers. Oh my gosh, like the emotional intensity, not being able to get in front of the right ones, not knowing who the real decision makers are. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, all of the influence and the push-pull is very exciting. I actually, in prep for this, reached out to some people that I know that have been in this industry for a long, long time and literally in these hospitals, and not for the faint of heart. Not for the faint of heart at all. So this for me is really, again, comes back to that sales and marketing alignment. And I think first also we need to clarify, it depends on what type of sale is happening right now. And we're kind of going to address some of those. So of course, if you've got a capital expenditure, so a large purchase, you're definitely selling in at the administrative level. And there might be multiple teams that are involved in that. You've got surgeon influence or doctor influence around whether they approve of that. But then also those sales cycles are way out ahead. You've got to understand the budgeting cycles. The second one, of course, is more of the departmental components. And so whether it's the reusables or the disposables, the smaller things that they churn through, or that they have budget control at the department level. Now, there's still contracts. sometimes that you have to navigate, but a lot of it is happening at the department level. And then, of course, the third one is really more on the pharmaceutical side or the therapeutic side, the P&T committees. So again, like I think I wanted to point that out because immediately goes back to personas. What are the influencing circles? What are the real decision makers? What are the real budget cycles? Because you've got to think independently about each one of these.
For sure. And there's also people who are selling commodities into hospitals.
Absolutely.
Here's where you get your bandages and your wheelchairs. I mean, that's a procurement play, and that's difficult in its own way for its own reasons.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think, one of the two key things come across the board for me. I kind of hinted at this a moment ago is understanding those selling cycles and the ownership and how the budgets actually work in the hospital. So I'm probably preaching to the choir here that most people absolutely realize this, but this is really, really critical because especially for a new product launch, depending on where the average cost of these projects or these packages come in, you might be a year and a half, 2.5 years out before you can even potentially see revenue cycling through. So understanding budget cycles and ownership and just asking those questions and arming your sales reps with that information on the training side or even how to navigate that, super, super critical. And then the other one is always aligning with what they care about and listening. So we keep coming back to this, but really getting intel on how do they perceive what they've got right now? How do they make those decisions? And really not taking it for granted on your features and benefits, but what is that hospital experiencing? What are those teams, those individuals experiencing right now so that you're having a very specific, very realistic conversation and you can really think through the actual value and how they define value.
There are a few ways you can go about understanding what a specific hospital in a specific region cares about right now. Number one, you can look at who's winning what awards for being the best hospital at this or that in your area. Are they on that list? If they're not on the list, they probably want to be. So that you can identify early on some of the areas where they want to improve. Most hospitals do have shareholder communications. If you can get your hands on some of that, a lot of it's public knowledge. If it's a publicly run organization, you're going to be able to find out what are their stated goals. What are they communicating with their shareholders about? If they have SEC filings, you can find out what their key initiatives are. So the more information you have around what do they actually believe is important, the better. And we'll be diving deeper into the details of some of those in just a minute.
Are you a CEO of a business-to-business company? Maybe you're a sales leader or a salesperson, or maybe you're in business-to-business marketing. Well, if so, I wrote a book for you, and it's called Corporate Caffeine. Business-to-business marketing is different, but there are certain predictable fundamental principles that will help you unleash your organizational potential and fill your pipeline sustainably. So you can find my book on Audible, on Amazon, on barnesandnoble.com, or any of your favorite retailers. Hope you enjoy it, and I'd love to hear your feedback. Understanding what the hospitals themselves care about is really, really important. And again, it comes back to that specificity, but now at the organizational level. So for instance, are they focused on credentials and outcomes? Are they trying to reduce turnover? And is that turnover on the staff side or is it on the patient side? Are they trying to grow? Is it about their reputation? What actual organizational challenges are they focused on? Is it revenue? Is it bottom line growth? There's just so many aspects of this, and you can't just assume. You've really got to diagnose what those are and then align your messaging around that.
And as you begin that diagnosis process, having an idea of just general trends is always a good place to start. So I pulled some of these and I looked at them, and based on the work that I've done with doctors and with healthcare organization, I'm like, yeah, this is what I'm seeing as well. So the first one was improving the bottom line. There is no hospital out there that's like, we have such high profit margins. We are rolling in the dough. Now, you would think they might be based on any medical bills you've seen recently, but honestly, most hospitals are struggling financially. Being able to improve that bottom line is a top priority for them. So if you can align what you're offering with something that impacts their financial health, you're on the right track.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one that we're seeing so frequently is alleviating that staff shortage issue or even reducing staff turnover and burnout. We actually have clients where their buyer persona are burned out healthcare people that are leaving the industry. This is real. And so making sure that if you have anything that can show this helps your staff, it makes their life easier, it improves any aspect of the highest friction points in their day-to-day job, that can be absolutely critical.
Objective number 3 for most healthcare organizations is improving patient engagement and satisfaction. And this is often today a digital play of some kind. So they're looking at how do we get more reviews, how do we get better reviews, how do we personalize the patient experience. And that includes a lot of, here's our education portal. This is the one that helps our patients with metabolic disorders or wound recovery or something. So they're getting that one-on-one appearance of follow-up digitally and not just in the office. So anything that you're doing to help improve patient engagement and how patients feel positively about a healthcare organization, that's usually a key trigger for them.
Absolutely. Another trend that we've identified is that meeting the demand for support or health at home. Now, this is a growing industry, and each organization might be looking at this a little bit different. Are they in that play now? Are they expanding it? Have they figured out? Or is this competition and pressure that they now have to alleviate or they have to navigate because it's hurting their numbers in other places?
Another key objective for a lot of healthcare organizations right now is health equity. So if there are ways that your brand, your product, your service helps them make resources available to more people in their community, makes it easier for patients to have access, those are also key drivers.
And finally, we can't ignore the technology component. Having EHR integration projects or other digital transformation projects is critical because this, again, points back to their financial health, their operational health, and what's actually happening day to day. But it can be very challenging staying on top of those and actually navigating that or prioritizing something when those initiatives are going on.
So before we jump into some more discussion around medical devices, I just wanted to touch on some of the other personas and some of the things that they care about. Because we talked about doctors, we talked about they care about patient outcomes, they care about their standing among their peers, they care about their bottom line, they care about the success of their practice. But what do some of the other personas care about? So for example, if you're needing to drive demand generation so that patients come into their doctor's office and they ask for the thing that you're selling, and we know this is how American healthcare marketing works, what are the things that they care about? For most patients, they care about feeling seen and heard. They care about how they feel about the quality of the care that they're receiving. They do care about outcomes, but they measure outcomes differently than hospitals and doctors do. And then they care about having their voice heard, and they care about ease of access. So those are all things that if you are helping hospitals achieve their goals for patient engagement and satisfaction, understanding how patients experience their healthcare experience, that's going to be important.
I love it. Absolutely. So I'm not going to do a super deep dive into devices. However, I do want to talk about arming the sales reps that are in the hospital, because at the end of the day, you get the contract sold in, they are the ones managing those really messy environments, those really complicated relationships. They're doing very technical presentations in a couple minutes and then a lot of times they're even inside of surgeries, they're watching, they're training, and they're listening to what's actually happening. So the wonderful thing about this is there can and should be a virtuous cycle of feedback from what's happening at the sales level back to corporate and marketing and more of that broad organizational messaging. But then also this ongoing communication internally, sales training, but not just about your product and your features. That is what we see so frequently, is an intense focus on that instead of the environment that they're actually navigating. And so the reason why there can be such a huge disparity between your best sales reps and your underperformers is because your best sales reps really, really understand the complexity and they are outstanding listeners. So they are customizing your value proposition and really navigating these for these exact environments. And if that message and that information information is not being distributed team wide or getting back to corporate, it can be a real fresh, it can really stop the progress that you're seeing, and you'll continue to be limited to specific sales reps. So, just kind of a shout out to how much support they need, and the faster that you can activate the different messaging at different levels and really continuous support. It's huge.
I'd like to add on to that, and this actually applies to whether organizations are selling pharmaceuticals or devices or technology. You got to get the nurses on your side.
Yeah.
So if you are selling a product or a service into a hospital or into any healthcare environment, including a private practice, if you're not showing the healthcare team how it's making their job easier, they will shut you down. You may think they don't have the power. They absolutely do. They can be your single most common point of failure. So making sure that you're communicating about how it's alleviating their workload, how it is making their patients happier with them. Those are the things that you're going to want to make sure are included in your marketing outreach, so you don't get sniped and those healthcare team members turn into your biggest champions.
And they will tell you.
Oh, yes.
They will tell you. They are frustrated so frequently. They will say, this is so aggravating, or it's causing this specific problem, or this keeps happening in the the surgical center. Like, it's unbelievable how much information they will give, and that will help you build the case to really make sure. Now, I do want to switch to one final thing, because we've only hit on it really quickly, is that you've been a part of some of those digital transformation and more of the technology aspect of selling into hospitals, which is different than devices and, those patient outcomes where there's that high specificity. Okay, so talk about that, because this cannot be ignored in modern healthcare B2B marketing.
So I have been working with a number of clients over the past decade around selling digital transformation products, services, and ideas into healthcare organizations. This is a very, very difficult thing to do. Hospitals are extremely complex, highly risk-averse, highly compliance-focused environments. They are way behind the curve on digital transformation versus virtually every other industry, including financial services, which is it's the next one when it comes to slow adoption. However, digital transformation has the ability to benefit healthcare organizations at a more profound level than almost any other industry. So it's very frustrating if you're selling software or consulting services into healthcare organizations to get that pushback. So a couple of key tips for you. Number one, you've got two different digital personas that you're selling to. So people who are in charge of the technology landscape. One is typically the CIO, and we call this persona the lighthouse keeper. And doesn't matter how big an organization is, there's somebody who's responsible for keeping the lights on and the internet working. And even if it's a CIO of a multi-billion-dollar healthcare organization, you've got somebody who is in that operational role. Usually, if they're pursuing digital transformation, they have been told to do it. This is coming from the shareholders. This is coming from the CEO. So they are looking for, how do I make this easy? How do I fit it within my budget? And how do I make sure it doesn't come back to bite me? So that's still a very risk-averse personality. And then you have a new and emerging type of technology leader in healthcare organizations. And sometimes it's called a chief digital officer. There may be other new titles and roles that are around this, but you'll recognize it when I describe it. This is the one that we call the change maker. And they're the one that's excited to get in there and alter the status quo and fundamentally transform how healthcare is delivered and improved digitally. And this is the person that is most interested in, what's the biggest change that I can make? How can I leave my mark on this organization? They may not be staying there for 5-10 years. Probably they're going to take this hospital, they want to completely renovate it, and then they want to flip it and move to their next role, because that's the kind of personality that they are. And you need to understand, if you're talking to a healthcare organization, which of those personalities is the one that's getting you in the door? Is the one that's been told, do this because I told you to? Or is it the one that's being asked to come in and do the change that everyone else has been too afraid to? And one of the key ways that you need to be able to cultivate both of these personas is through thought leadership. But understand, if you're in the digital transformation space, you cannot say scary stuff all the time and cultivate relationships with both of these personas. So you need to be respecting that some people are going to be more risk averse and some people are going to be have a greater appetite for risk. So when you're doing thought leadership, it can't just be change everything, do it now, let's innovate, let's do everything new and different. You need to be talking in a very practical way to the concerns and the realities that most healthcare organizations are facing. And as I always say, meet your customers where they are and then take them on the journey.
Absolutely. So I think just as a quick recap, when we're thinking about B2B healthcare marketing, a couple things rise to the surface. So number one, document what you know. Document your tribal knowledge, all of your personas, what those people, those decision makers, those organizations care about, and document how your product, your service, your offering aligns with their priorities. This is often very, very different than the outcomes that your product or service delivers. But this is what changes the game in order to make sure that you get into these healthcare professionals or these hospitals. The second is making sure that once it's documented, you are seeking simplicity, because since these are really complicated environments, you're looking for points of friction, points of misalignment, or places that are broken in the system that you can simply add more value and then scale those aha moments across your organization and then prioritize your opportunities one at a time so that you can consistently build on those improvements and really be able to scale this unique messaging environment. The final one that I would say is I am so frequently surprised at where the biggest point of impact is going to come from. So oftentimes when we work with our healthcare clients, they assume it's going to be this one thing, right? Maybe it's demand gen, or maybe it's referrals, or maybe it's we need a better website, or, but they usually come in with a really core assumption. And very rarely does that core assumption make it to the top priority list. And I think it is because of that complexity. And once we nail it down, there are so many exciting opportunities to systematize immediate improvements and then start navigating some of the more complex or the scarier components of this and just building something that actually is sustainable and forecastable.
Excellent.
You guys, we hope you enjoyed this episode. We would love to hear your thoughts, your comments. We would definitely love to hear any best practices or tips you've got. And most importantly, we would love to see you hit that subscribe button and that like button if you are enjoying the content that we're bringing to you week after week. So thank you so much. As always, we will see you on the flip side next week. Onward and upward.